Hey y'all, I'm Anissa Khalifa. You're listening to The Broadside, where we tell stories from our home at the crossroads of the South. This week, we visit the small town of Marshall in western North Carolina, a community ravaged by Hurricane Helene earlier this year. But this story isn't about the storm, or climate change, or the walls of water that rushed through the Black Mountains in September. It's about what happened after, how people create systems to help each other, and how the best aspects of humanity can shine in the wake of a disaster. This episode comes to us from Outside In. Produced by our friends at New Hampshire Public Radio, it's a show where curiosity and the natural world collide. We'll be back next week with a new episode of The Broadside. In the meantime, from Outside In, this is The Ballad and the Flood.
There is an old saying about the town of Marshall, North Carolina. It's 1 mile long, 1 street wide, sky high, and hell deep. It's nestled in the Black Mountains of southern Appalachia. It's got a couple of cafes, a flower shop, a courthouse, and an old jail.
In 2016, I pushed all my chips in on Marshall.
This is artist and entrepreneur Josh Kopis.
I bought a house out here, and I bought the old Madison County Jail at a property auction with 3 friends for under $100,000, and it was the craziest thing that I've ever done.
The jail was exactly what you'd imagine. Metal bars, peeling paint, and a whole lot of history. There was even a local guy who escaped out of the roof in the 1990s.
Yeah, Omar Lee Smith went through the roof. In this room that we're sitting in right now, I actually found his hacksaw blades in the attic during the reno and called him up and said, "Hey, dude, come down here. I got something I think you want to see." And he said, "Where'd you find them?" And I said, "They were in the attic." And he just said, "That's right where I left them."
Josh and his friends spent 5 years refurbishing the place. Now it's a boutique hotel and a restaurant, plus a music venue.
Anyway, so Omar, towards the end of the project, he came in here and he's looking around and he just looked at me and he said, "Josh, I just gotta say it, man. I really love what you've done with the place."
But then, in September of 2024, came Hurricane Helene. As the storm traveled north, it poured into the Black Mountains. The French Broad River surged over its banks, then over the railroad tracks. According to Josh's flood gauge, it crested at 27 feet.
I was standing on the courthouse and I watched all the windows shatter in my friend's coffee shop, and then just all the chairs just floated out the windows and down the street.
During the storm, every single building downtown flooded almost to the second story. And when it was over, the entire town of Marshall was covered in a thick layer of mud and trash.
In that moment, I'm a really optimistic person, but I was like, we're finished. You don't know how to act, you don't know how to be. I just remember being like, do I make breakfast? Do I eat? What am I doing? How do I live? What is my purpose? Who am I? I guess I just go to the town. And then everyone else kind of just had that same idea. And then we were just all here. And then people were like, I guess we just start cleaning up. And so that's what happened. We did.
This is Outside In. I'm Nate Hegyi. A month after Hurricane Helene, our producer, Justine Paradis, spent 4 days in and around the town of Marshall. She went to see what it really looks like on the ground in the wake of a disaster.
We're getting some taste of what's possible. I know there's something really liberating about that.
how people create systems to help each other.
It's been the most rewarding month of my life. It's renewed my faith in humanity.
But what she found wasn't just a model of mutual aid. It was a glimpse into another way to live with each other.
It was like through that process that I kind of was like, you know what? Like, this town is worth saving, because the town is not the buildings or the stuff, it's the people, and the people are still here.
You come to the New Yorker Radio Hour for conversations that go deeper with people you really want to hear from, whether it's Bruce Springsteen or Questlove or Olivia Rodrigo, Liz Cheney, or the godfather of artificial intelligence, Geoffrey Hinton, or some of my extraordinarily well-informed colleagues at the New Yorker. So join us every week on the New Yorker Radio Hour, wherever you listen to podcasts.
Great. Come on upstairs. All right. So the water came to like here. It went to like this top step, but it didn't go in.
By the time I arrived in Marshall, it had been 4 weeks since Helene. And by that point, the bottom floor of the jail hotel was a full-on construction zone. But the second floor was like a time capsule, unscathed.
Like when you walk in this room,
bed is made.
The beds are made. There's a serious surrealness to that.
Josh Kopis is a person who looks comfortable rolling up his sleeves. He's a potter, been throwing clay since he was a kid. But after the flood, it was hard to know where to start. The power was out, and so was the cell signal.
It was hard. Like, I didn't talk to my mom for days.
In a lot of towns, there was no potable water, and roads were impassable, or just plain gone.
She's like, I know you're smart and you're good, but like, she's also like, I don't know if you're alive.
For thousands of people, the only thing they could think to do was to leave the house and start to find each other, often by walking and hitchhiking, knocking on doors, leaving notes. In Marshall, people grabbed shovels and just started digging out, hauling mud out of the buildings in buckets and wheelbarrows. And soon after, people also started singing.
It's been a year since last we met, and we may never meet again. I have struggled to forget, but the struggle is in vain.
This is Sheila K. Adams singing in a video Josh posted to Instagram a little over a week after the flood. She's sitting on a wooden bench in the jail, hands clasped, eyes closed. You can hear a flurry of construction activity in the background.
His bright smile haunts me still in the midnight on the sea.
Sheila K. is a 7th-generation ballad singer. Before the flood, she and other singers would gather at the Old Marshall Jail once a month for something called a ballad swap.
So the ballad tradition is an oral tradition, and it's done how we say knee to knee. You sing a verse, and then you sing it back, and then they add a verse, and then you sing it back.
These are spiritual songs and stuff like murder ballads. Stories told in song, typically sung a cappella by single voices. They go back to the first Scots-Irish settlers who came to North America.
Appalachia was an extremely isolated place, and so the songs were preserved here in some extents better than where they originated from.
So this impromptu performance in the jailhouse wasn't just a diversion. It was also a statement.
They're powerful. Like, I watched Sheila K. sing a song in a pile of garbage that used to be my restaurant, and I don't know any person that could hear that and not cry. Like, it was our loss in this moment, but it was also just like this generational outpouring of like who we are as a people. It was one of the most powerful things that I've ever seen.
In
That day, Josh and Sheila Kay promised each other that they would sing there again soon.
We made a commitment to each other to do the ballad swap before the end of the month.
When I decided to travel to North Carolina, it was because I wanted to understand mutual aid during disaster recovery, to see what it looks like up close. The basic idea of mutual aid is simple. Neighbors helping neighbors. It can look all kinds of ways. It's a practice of voluntary free help, when people self-organize to do stuff like pass out food, coordinate a cleanup effort, or deliver free firewood. Disasters are inherently chaotic, but something that makes mutual aid operations so remarkable is how sophisticated they can be.
Who do we see? Go to that table there to get your PPE. Unless you want to work at the decon station. They were looking for more volunteers there.
A couple miles up the hill from Marshall sits a dusty workyard, the HQ of a construction company which builds tiny houses called Nanostead. Get it? Homestead, but nano. In the weeks after the hurricane, it became a hub of mutual aid for a specific purpose, to be the staging point for the Marshall cleanup operation. At Nanostead, they suit volunteers up in protective gear, send them downtown to dig mud, and then bring them back for a hot meal and maybe a little music at the end of the day.
We have more. I put some of the jackets in here too. Okay. We have more. I just didn't want to give you all of it.
Oh no!
But anyway, they're all like 2XL.
This is the PPE department. A bunch of tables and bins under a tent, with stacks and stacks of rubber gloves, work boots, Tyvek suits, and respirators. It's being run by Becca Nicholson, who lives a mile or so down the road, and is right now psyched about a new shipment of high visibility, or high-vis, construction gear.
It's the little thing,
It is the little thing.
High-vis pants.
High-vis pants.
We're all so stoked about it.
Becca explained that cleanups like the one happening in Marshall aren't just hard work, they're also dangerous. Floodwater and leftover mud can contain sewage, contaminants, and all kinds of chemicals.
Myself personally, the first few days there were a ton of fumes, so many fumes. So I had like a 3-day migraine the few days after the storm.
From what?
Just like I walked down to as far as I could go to the end of Main Street before the water came up, and there were just huge propane tanks spewing their contents, oil tanks spewing their contents, like floating down the river.
The way Nanostead Hub came to be is in the days after the storm, the folks who run the tiny house company decided to grill some hot dogs for their neighbors. And quickly, people just started gathering there and bringing supplies. Meanwhile, downtown, people had already started digging out the mud. The problem was,
no one was wearing gloves. No one was wearing, hardly anyone was wearing any masks or anything. And I kind of had this oh gosh, this is bad. And I came here to drop off supplies one day and I was like, oh, I feel like they need help.
Mutual aid hinges on identifying what people need and getting that to them. It might sound simple enough, but to do that, you gotta be so organized. At Nanostead, someone scrounged up a whiteboard and hung it on the wall. This whiteboard is, to this day, the central place where people can literally write down a need.
We asked for things. We were like, here's what we need. We learned we needed to be really, really specific about what we were asking for in terms of supplies and gear. And people came through for us. The moment we'd run out of something, a whole truckload of it would show up here. And it was just kind of magic. And that just continued for weeks.
And does that come from putting stuff on the Google Docs, needs list at Nanostead, that kind of thing?
Oh, we didn't have a Google Doc for a while. I think originally it was word of mouth. People would come by here and take a picture with their phone of the whiteboard that we have, which is still happening. A lot of us were posting on our own social media, just hey, Nanostead has this really important emergency need right now.
Is that a helicopter?
Yeah, there's a helicopter. There's not as many of them as there used to be, but I guess I kind of tune them out now. Yeah.
Nanostead Hub is, of course, far from the only mutual aid hub around. They are everywhere, in shopping plazas, churches, schools, old auto shops. Some are tiny and bare bones, like a community whiteboard someone hung up at the end of their driveway for their neighbors in their holler. Others are big and official, sometimes run by the National Guard. Actually, the region was so overwhelmed with donations that organizing stuff just ended up being a huge job. And a lot of soldiers found themselves spending their deployment sorting groceries. These hubs are places you can get free stuff like clothes or food or firewood. You can register at a FEMA tent or grab a hot meal from World Central Kitchen, the same organization that's in places like Palestine. In some places, you can even have yourself an acupuncture session or get therapy. Some hubs are supported by long-term mutual aid groups who've been around for years and who know how to do this kind of work fast. But when it comes to Nanostead Hub, it didn't exist before Helene. Somehow, it coalesced within days of the storm.
I had a group of professional disaster response people from California. I don't remember who they were or what agency they were with, but it was early days and they were who's in charge? And I was we are. And they were just we've actually never seen a civilian effort that is this tight.
This is Josh Kopis again.
Receiving help actually takes a fair amount of administrative bandwidth. If just a bunch of people show up in this town without a plan and without someone to project manage them and give them direction, they're in the way.
At this point, Nanostead is officially a charitable foundation. But at its heart, it's self-organized and kind of anarchistic, run entirely by locals. And people find their own place, according to their strengths. Like Rachel Bennett.
Also known as Rachel Runner, because I run between Nanostead and downtown.
Rachel had her hair in a long braid, which she secured at the end by tying her own hair back on itself, which I found very cool.
I'm setting the fashion, It looks
great. I love how the reflective pits are around the fanny pack.
Exactly. It's my marsupial pouch. It's funny because we have PPE fashion here. So, we find what things that we like and, we keep on adapting.
Rachel knew that she was not going to be able to dig out the mud, so she became an informal, quote, personal relationship liaison, as she put it. She marches a supply cart around downtown Marshall filled with snacks and PPE and encourages people to swap out their dirty gloves. Over by the shovels, I met Steve Matlack, wearing his name tag on his baseball cap and a t-shirt that said, Laissez les bon temps rouler, let the good times roll.
I showed up about a couple days after the storm just to see if I could help out for a couple hours, and somehow I have never left. So I'm a full-timer, more than full-time here. I'm here every day.
Steve ended up finding himself responsible for the tool department.
Tarps, hoses, hammers, electrical bits, you name it, box cutters, we have it. The number one thing that we send out by far are extension cords, electrical extension cords, the heavy gauge, because of all the generators we send out.
At their peak, Nanostead churned out 250 to 300 volunteers a day. That included a lot of locals, but also tons of people from all over the South and beyond. That Monday afternoon, they included a church group from Raleigh. For Keith Maggioroni, it was his second trip to Marshall. Why are you compelled to, come and travel for the day with a group of people and come to this town that's not your own?
We're all out here to be the hands and feet of Jesus Christ. That's kind of what motivates us. We saw this whole community hurting out here, so just to serve the community, serve the Lord, and do what we can to help in the recovery.
Every day's different. You never know who might show up. Like that Monday afternoon, Nanostead received a surprise delivery. What's happening right now?
Apparently there's a truck full of hamburger meat.
We get a myriad of donations here at Nanostead Hub in Marshall, North Carolina. And people have been so generous with answering our needs. And this fine gentleman, I guess, is dropping off some hamburger meat for our auxiliary kitchen here, which provides meals for all of our staff and volunteers. delicious meals.
Who's staff?
Shut up, it's my turn.
Are we staff?
I mean, we're all volunteers, yeah.
Yeah, we did. We brought a whole trailer load from 4 churches, small country churches that we have. Everybody just poured their hearts out. We brought lots and lots of good items for these people up here that I know are in real need.
Yeah, that's beautiful. Yeah.
A lot of food, a lot of baby products, a lot of clothes, bedclothes, pillows.
Well, safe drive back. Are you driving back tonight?
Thank you.
Yeah, amazing.
Driving back. We appreciate what you do, too.
Appreciate you. Thank you.
Thank you.
There are plenty of stories or Hollywood depictions of people behaving selfishly, even violently, in the aftermath of a natural disaster. But decades of sociological research tell a different story. That by and large, that's not what happens. That overwhelmingly, in disaster after disaster, people behave generously, share resources, social barriers fall, old arguments don't matter, and neighbors help neighbors. Later, people often miss these times after a disaster. It's not that violence never happens, it's just that it's the exception. Still, disaster recovery is a long haul. During my time reporting, I ran into something a lot, pinned up on bulletin boards or posted to Instagram. It was a line graph with peaks and valleys, titled Emotional Phases of a Disaster. Early on, there's a honeymoon period where people are coming together. It's a high. Then there's a precipitous fall as disillusionment sets in. A low that's actually way lower than the disaster itself.
I don't know where we are now.
A few people pointed to that cliff and said, look.
I think we're heading. I think we're maybe at this curve.
The honeymoon period is over, and I'm about to hit disillusionment.
The way that I survive, and I think we all have, is we need tiny victories. You cannot do this all at once, and it'll destroy you. The breadth of it is so massive.
And that's the very reason that Josh wants to host the ballad swap by the end of the month.
This is my life. Hell yeah, I'm gonna throw a little party. We need a little party.
That's after a break.
Have you ever had the urge to sneak behind the cordoned-off areas of a museum? Or roam the halls after closing time? The Smithsonian's flagship podcast, Side Door, will sneak you behind the scenes of the world's largest museum and research complex. Come learn about the ghosts that supposedly walk the museum halls after dark, how a train robbery gave rise to criminal forensics, why leeches are actually the coolest thing ever, and how to get away with murder in the Arctic. Maybe. You'll discover stories of history, science, art, and culture you won't find in a display case. You can listen to Side Door wherever you get your podcasts, or find us online at si.edu/sidedoor.
It's Tuesday morning, and I'm riding into downtown Marshall with my friends Alex and Melanie. It's Alex's pickup truck. They'd both spent a lot of time in Marshall in the early days after the storm, digging out mud and power washing the street. But they hadn't seen it in over a week.
Oh, God. Oh, yeah, right. This is your first time
Oh, my
down
God.
here.
Welcome to downtown Marshall, all twisted up.
Look at that. Look at all that junk in there.
Oh, my God.
Car seats.
It's a month after Helene. Melanie and Alex are pointing out how destroyed everything is, but also they're seeing how much progress has been made. You can actually see the street now. There are piles and piles of drywall torn out of the buildings, just lined up on the sidewalk. And one big change?
Look, the National Guard's doing traffic control.
I know, I'm why? Can't I just go around? No, good for them.
Hey.
Hey.
How's it going?
We're doing good.
We pull up to the Old Marshall Jail Hotel. Josh Kopis and some friends have been working here all morning. They're saving what they can and dealing with a lot of trash.
I'm just doing tractor.
You're just doing tractor?
Yeah, I'm doing
Where?
tractor. Out back. I'm doing the things. We got to set up for the ballad swap. Yeah. You know, it's for the people. It's for us. It's for anyone that wants to come and listen to the songs and feel that together. And so we're doing it tomorrow.
It's a big push. The entire first floor of the Old Marshall Jail Hotel is still a construction zone. The drywall's been torn out and the framing's left behind, wires and all. It's also dirty. A lot of the mud has turned to dust, and when the wind kicks up, a few of us put on our masks. Alex and Melanie jump in to help power wash chairs for tomorrow night. Later, one of the soldiers directing traffic asks Melanie out, while Melanie's wearing a full-body Tyvek suit and N95. Demonstrably the hottest outfit there is these days. Today, Josh wouldn't be done here until 8 o'clock. One odd thing about this disaster, and the climate crisis generally, is how wildly different it can be experienced in different places. Just 15 minutes from Marshall, I spend an evening with Josh, Alex, and Melanie in a beautiful house, listening to records and playing Magic: The Gathering. We sit around the dining room table while Alex cooks pasta puttanesca for dinner.
We're rebuilding our whole town. We're just doing it. And the contractors, like, they're basically working on 12 buildings right now, but they were like, it's like one job. It's not 12 jobs. It's the whole town. This is not a race. This is not a competition. Like, if I get my building open and the rest of the town is destroyed, like, what is the point of that? I don't want to live in we got to do it all together. So, like, we're building a strategy where, like, trade by trade, process by process, like, you just cycle everyone through
It's drywall day.
And you go
all the drywall.
You go from one building to the next, and then the painters are there, and, like, you can do it. You can organize it in a way that actually creates a lot of efficiency, and people aren't, like, scrambling for resources, like, and not, I mean, that's one part. There are other people. I mean, everyone's in a different space. There are people that won't come back. Yeah. I think we're moving into that phase where, like, you start asking harder questions about rebuilding and what it costs, and I think it's going to get a little bit trickier now.
Yeah, but let's sit down and eat dinner now.
Let's sit down.
Thank you so much for cooking while we just chatted.
The pork worked out, right?
Something happened during Helene which might sound kind of basic. But after talking to a lot of people, I think its impact on the aftermath might have been actually huge. Because the cell signal went out for days, if you wanted to talk to someone, you had to physically go find them. This is very different from texting each other after the storm for updates, each in their own house. And I do think it helps set the tone of the recovery. Physically showing up. It says, in a really profound way, we are here for each other, for real. But now, like Josh said, the problems are getting trickier. And the needs that arise in the next phase, it might not be possible to write them on a whiteboard. One thing I haven't said yet explicitly, the 4 days I spent in North Carolina, they were in the last week of October, literally days before the election. But there, People didn't have a lot of headspace for the fever pitch and division facing this country. They were very focused on what was right in front of them.
Like, how did a car get up in a tree? You know, it's just, and like 40-foot shipping containers that were crushed like tinfoil. You know, it's just, you can't imagine the power of the water. Like, it's just.
This again is Keith Maggioroni. He's at the decontamination station at Nanosted now, coming back from an afternoon of ripping out hardwood floors downtown.
Yeah, I mean, I think in the aftermath of a disaster is where we really see the power of community. I've said to several people, learning that it's not the government that's going to fix the aftermath of something like this. It's the community. It's the Christians. It's the people in nearby towns and states that are going to come walk beside the people here.
It's not that the national atmosphere or the federal government don't affect what's happening here at all. Dark conspiracies swirled after the storm, particularly focused on FEMA. Rumors that FEMA was confiscating relief supplies, or that all the aid was going to undocumented immigrants. Rumors that put barriers between aid and the people who needed that aid most. And that scapegoated communities of color. In at least a couple cases, these rumors also contributed to someone actually threatening FEMA workers. But most of what I saw in the community that I moved through was the exact opposite of this kind of thing. What I saw was mutual aid everywhere and handwritten signs reading, "Thank you. Thank you for helping us."
I was getting really political before the storm. As soon as it hit, no, I wanted to be here with the people doing what they were doing, taking care of each other. I went home when I finally got internet back, and I couldn't watch anything I used to watch because it was disgusting.
Do you mind introducing yourself for the tape?
My name is Ian Montgomery. Yep. I've been doing inventory and equipment, receiving and distributing to people who need it, and it's been the most rewarding month of my life.
Why?
Well, as I mentioned, I was I didn't mention pessimism, but I was getting pretty pessimistic about the world, and this renewed my faith in humanity. And, you know, I'm not glad the storm happened, but I'm glad that what came out of it, and I've been a part of it.
In her book, A Paradise Built in Hell, author and climate activist Rebecca Solnit wrote about the aftermath of disasters like Helene. She argues that, in the mainstream, our culture is pretty individualistic, meaning that in everyday life, most of us are out for ourselves. We're divided and lonely. In these ways, everyday life is a catastrophe in its own right, a catastrophe that a disaster like Helene can intensify, but far more often offers a reprieve, a time marked by togetherness, meaningful work, agency, and belonging to a greater whole. Quote, "Disaster may offer us a glimpse, but the challenge is to make something of it, to recognize and realize these desires and these possibilities in ordinary times, if there are ordinary times ahead."
I think Alex is there.
The evening of October 30th, Josh and Sheila Kay delivered on their promise of a ballad swap at the Old Marshall Jail. The promotion was entirely word of mouth. When I showed up, there was already a good crowd on the back patio.
Hello.
Hi. Welcome to the ballad swap. This is a tiny victory.
So we are going to sing some ballads for y'all, all y'all. Thank you for coming. And
People found their seats in the freshly power-washed chairs. The air felt warm and soft, and the patio twinkled with bistro lights, which miraculously still worked after the flood. The beer and wine had been pulled out of the mud and also power-washed, and tonight, Drinks were free.
We made a commitment to have the ballad swap before the end of the month. And we're fucking doing that.
The custom at the ballad swap, Sheila Kay explained, is to start with the oldest person present. Tonight, that was Annalo Phillips.
Oh, dead. Oh, dead. Won't you spare me over till another year? Well, what is I can't see. Ice cold hands taking hold of me. This is death none can excel. Hold the key to heaven or hell.
When it was her turn, Sheila Kay sang a ballad about love ending in tragedy.
Little Margaret's in her cold black coffin, with her face turned towards the wall.
Then there was a surprise appearance.
Is Rising Appalachia.
Rising Appalachia had showed up, a beloved local folk band.
Go tell my companions and children most dear to weep not for me now I'm gone. The same hand that led me through scenes most severe has kindly assisted me home.
The next singer, William Ritter, stepped up to the mic carrying his young daughter on his shoulders.
You're pulling my hair, that's all right. Father, now our meeting's over, and we must part. And if I never see you anymore, I'll love you in my heart. We will land on the shore. We will land on the shore. We will land on the shore and be safe forevermore.
Ballads are traditionally performed solo, but tonight, people started to join in. During the song, I looked at Josh, who was sitting behind me, and he was holding his face in his hands, quietly crying. The good kind of crying, I think. Tears for this tiny victory.
We will land on the shore. We will land on the shore. We will land on the shore and be safe forevermore.
Thank you to everyone who spoke with me for this story. I cannot name everyone because it is a long list, but I'll do my best. The voices you heard we didn't identify were Meredith Silver, Anna Thompson, Melanie Risch, Reed Cresswell, Jim Perkerson, Kenneth Satterfield, Alex Barrow, and Jazz Maltz. Thank you to the folks at Nanosted, especially Kevin Ward and Jeremy Stauffer. Thank you to Rural Organizing and Resilience, aka ROAR, and the folks at Poder Emma and Collaborativa La Milpa. Thank you also to Aaron Stone, Clay White, and Luke Mitchell. And a special thanks to Mil Norman Risch, Alex Barrow, and Melanie Risch for putting me up in Marshall and in Burnsville. By the way, the ballad swap is not the only party that people threw around Marshall. Last weekend, people threw a volunteer appreciation party at Nanosted, including a PPE fashion show. We'll post a video on our Instagram, along with lots of pictures from my time in North Carolina. Follow us there. We're at Outside In Radio. This episode was reported and mixed by me, Justine Paradis. It was edited by our executive producer, Taylor Quimby. The host of Outside In is Nate Hegyi. Our team also includes Felix Poon, Marina Henke, and Kate Dario. Our director of on-demand audio is Rebecca Lavoie. Music in this episode came from Cody High, Gustav, Dr. Turtle, Blue Dot Sessions, and Silver Maple. Outside In is a production of NHPR.
We could all use a little help navigating the news these days. The Consider This podcast wants to give you a hand. 6 days a week, we'll help you make sense of the day's biggest news story and what it means for you in less than 15 minutes. Listen now to the Consider This podcast from NPR.